Hello, my name's Jonathan Mead, and I am going to be your instructor for CINS 129. I'm going to start off week one's video with a few quick announcements and just some general class information. You should see on your screen the Blackboard class for CINS 129. A few things that I want to bring your attention to. First, any class announcements will be posted on this very first page in the announcements section. So keep an eye on these. You want to check this at least 3 or 4 times a week to make sure I haven't made any changes to the assignment or posted any important information. The next thing that I want to bring your attention to is the Start Here section. For those of you who haven't used or haven't had an Ivy Tech online class or used Blackboard before, I highly recommend you go through the tutorial for Blackboard, but a few things I did want to point out. Under the Start Here, there is the syllabus section, and that's got all of the information that you need for the syllabus for the class. But more importantly, this getting your computer ready for class. I put one important link in here, and that's the link to Microsoft DreamSpark. Microsoft DreamSpark is where we are going to get Microsoft Visual Studio Professional 2012, and that is a required software package for this class. If for some reason you don't have Visual Studio Professional 2012, but you have another version of Visual Studio, like you have Visual Studio 2010, or Visual Studio Ultimate 2012 or Visual Studio 2010 Ultimate, something like that, send me a quick email and just let me know which version you have, and I'll let you know whether or not that is going to work for this class. Going to the DreamSpark website, I did verify that Ivy Tech is a valid school with DreamSpark, so you should be able to sign in and verify yourself as a student and download software. If you go to, I think it's under the student section, and then go to the software catalog, the application that we want is this right here, Visual Studio Professional 2012. Try to stay away from Visual Studio 2013. I mean, unless you really know what you're doing already and you want to play around with it, that's fine. But I haven't played around with it yet, so I'm not going to be able to help you out with that version as much as I can with 2012. Going back to Blackboard, another thing that I do want to point out, if we go ahead and look at the class session for this week, I put a little to-do list for you. So review the syllabus, get your computer ready for class, post your introductory post. If you go to the discussion section, or there's a link to it right here, you will see one of the forums that you have access to is the Introductions forum. Under the Introductions forum, if you just want to post a general little message about yourself, you can see some of your students have already, or fellow students have already done that. Also, this is going to be your only discussion assignment for this week, so you need to post at least one original post, and you need to post at least 2 other posts on somebody else's introduction. So make sure you get your 3 posts in. Just a quick note, I do like to make sure that your posts are meaningful. Try not to post 1, 2, 3 sentence posts. Try to make them a few paragraphs apiece. That will get you a better grade on discussions. Also, when you're replying to people's posts, I really pay attention to when you just say, oh, I agree with this person. That's not a good enough post. You need to say why you agree with them, give us a little bit more detail. If you have any questions about discussion questions, feel free to email me, or you can also post a post in the I Need Help forum. I'll go over that one here in just a little bit, in a little bit more detail. The next thing I wanted to do was go ahead and jump right in and take a look at Visual Studio. When you first open Visual Studio, here, let me actually close this down and open it again. Okay, this should be the first thing that you see when you open Visual Studio. You'll have your Getting Started page here, and you'll also have a few things that you can do, open a new project or open an existing project. You may not see this connect to Team Foundation Server. I have a slightly different version of Visual Studio. I actually have Visual Studio Ultimate, which has a couple of additional tools in it. So let's get started with a quick tour of Visual Studio. Let's go ahead and create our first project. You can either click on New Project here, or go up to File, New, Project. And when you go to open a project, it's going to give you several different templates to choose from. As you can see, I actually have Visual Basic, C#, C++, F#, as well as C# installed. If you have multiple languages installed, make sure you select Visual C# as the program that you want to use. Under Visual C#, there are quite a few other different types of templates that you can use. To start with, we are going to be working with console applications. Later on in this class, we will get into doing some Windows Forms applications. We may touch on WPF applications a little bit, and potentially maybe some of the other different templates that are in here if we find we have time. Ignore those Android ones. Those are an add-on that I have installed. So when you're creating your first application, you want to select console application. That's what you're going to want to do for this week's assignment. And whenever you're creating an assignment for this class, you want to give it a meaningful name. And I like to make sure that your name is in the name of the application. So I'm going to name mine Jonathan Mead. Put in a little underscore there, and we're going to say this is assignment 1. So that is the name of my project. The reason why it's important to name your project here is because as you name your project, it's going to create folders and different files automatically for you. And if you just leave it the default name of like console application 1 or console application 2, it's going to be really hard to rename those down the line. So make sure when you're creating a new project, you put a meaningful name in that new project. And we'll just select OK. And here we are with our very first program. Now, if you've never done any programming before, this may be a little bit confusing to you at first. There seems to be a lot going on the page, but it's all broken down into different sections. So we'll go over what each one of those is here in just a minute. Just like standard Windows applications, you have your different tools up here. These may look a little bit different on yours. Sorry, I had to pause the video there for a second. I triggered something I didn't mean to in Visual Studio. These may look a little bit different on your version of Visual Studio than mine. Again, I have Ultimate, so I have a few different extra things that you may not. Don't worry about that. Chances are I know we're not going to be using those for this class. Right here in the center, this is your main window. This is where you're going to be doing all of your typing for the program. This is where all the real programming comes into place. Over on the side here, you have the Solution Explorer. When we're just, for the most part, the very first applications we're going to be doing, this isn't going to play a big role. You're not going to have to do a whole lot with the Solution Explorer. But as we get into more advanced programming concepts, where we start talking about creating classes and different things like that, you will be using the Solution Explorer a little bit more. But this is the program that I created, Jonathan Mead _ assign1, and these are the different files that are associated with that project. So I've got a properties, references, an app.config file, which we'll get into later in the semester, and my program.cs. Program.cs for console applications is where all of your program is going to reside. Like I said, as we get into more advanced concepts, there'll be more program files or more files that are associated with your program, but for now it's just going to be this program.cs. Down below that you have a properties window. Again, in console program you're not going to see a whole lot pop up here, but when we go to start doing Windows programming, this will be heavily used for setting different components and different items that we're going to be putting on Windows forms. And then finally down here you have your output window. This is just going to give you any error messages that are popping up. You'll see I have a TFS could not connect to server. That's because I'm using my personal version of Visual Studio, which I normally connect to a program called Team Foundation Service, which allows us to store source code and everything on a big scale. So now let's get into writing our first application. Inside the program.cs file, you'll notice that when I created the project, it put some things into this file for me. The first thing it did was put the using statements in for me. These are just the generic .NET components that Visual Studio is assuming that I'm going to be needing for use with writing a basic console application. For the most part, for the first few assignments, these are either going to be automatically inserted for you by Visual Studio, or I'm going to tell you to go ahead and insert specific using statements into this section. What this is doing is it's telling the compiler that I am using the .NET component system.threading.tasks. Now, my application, this one is not going to be using that, but I'm just going to leave it alone for right now. The next thing that you're going to see is the namespace. The namespace is a generic name for where your code resides in the application. When you have more than one code file, namespace becomes extremely important because it groups your code together by the namespace, not necessarily by the file. So if I had 3 files that all had namespace Jonathan Mead _ assignment 1, all of the classes within that file are going to be used within that same namespace. We'll get into what this means a little bit more later on in the class and why it's important, but for now just know that it's there, that you have a namespace, and then we start with a curly bracket and write all of our code in between that. The next line down, you'll see the class statement. Again, this is another thing that helps group our code together. It's actually a very important thing that groups our code together. For now, we're just going to accept that we have classes, and we're not going to go too in-depth into what the class means. If you've had other programming, especially other object-oriented programming classes, you probably know what this means, but we'll get to that later. The next thing we have is our main method. This is where the code is actually going to be executed in the console application when we start writing our program. And in C#, all code is enclosed in curly brackets or curly braces. That's what this symbol is right here, as opposed to just a standard square bracket. You just hit Shift square bracket and that puts in the curly brace. So let's go ahead and get started with writing our first program. In this week's assignment, I ask you to write a Hello World application. Pretty much every programming class you've ever taken or probably ever will take always starts with a Hello World application. In our case, that's extremely simple to write. We just want to tell the program to write a string of text to the console and then pause and wait for us to accept that text and close the program. In C#, the keyword to putting program directly onto the console is console. One of the great features of Visual Studio is called IntelliSense and IntelliType, and that's what's just started happening right here with this little drop down. You'll see as I type, that menu will change and you'll have different options available. Console is the keyword that I was looking for. It references class system.console, And that is how we are going to start writing text out to the screen. So if I do console period, and then I want to write, in C#, you always follow methods with parentheses, and we're going to say hello world. Another important aspect of C# is that you need to tell C# whenever you are ending a line of code, and we do that with a semicolon. So I'll put a semicolon there. So now I have a program that is going to write hello world to the console. If I want to run this program to see what it looks like, I can go up here and just hit this start button, and what that's going to do is it's going to start a debug, which means it's going to attempt to run the code, and any errors it's going to pull back into Visual Studio and show me where the errors are. So I'm going to go ahead and hit start. It's going to build the application, and you probably saw just a black box pop up on the screen and go away. And it actually did say hello world in it, although it was too quick for you to see. Basically, the reason why it just popped up and went away is because I didn't put any breaks in to wait for user input to say, press any key to continue. So I'm going to go ahead and do a console.read, and what console.read does is it will take whatever somebody types into the console and read it into your program. We're going to use it just to read in a basic enter. That way it will pause the application while we're running it. So I'll go ahead and hit start again. And you can see we ran our hello world, and it is pausing this time. Hit enter, and it takes us back to Visual Studio. That program is closed. Another thing I want to point out is how to put comments into your code. This will help when it comes to me grading your assignments. It will help me understand what you're trying to do, and if you're having problems, I might be able to figure out what you're trying to do and give you some pointers to help you out. Comments in C# are two forward slashes. It's the one that is directly underneath the question mark key. And you'll notice as I type something in here, it shows up in green, and that means that it is a comment. Another way that you can comment code is if I were just to type, this is a comment, and you can see we've got all sorts of these little red squiggly lines under here. That's Visual Studio's way of telling me, hey, this code has a problem. It's not going to compile. So I can highlight that, and I can go up here and hit the comment button, and that will comment my highlighted code. What that comes in really handy for is if you've written a whole bunch of code and you're not sure it's working, or you want to make sure that it doesn't run for some reason, you can just hit the console button or the comment button, and it will comment out your code. And then conversely, you have the remove comment or uncomment button up here that you can click, and that will remove your comments. We'll go over one other concept with the console command here to show you some basic formatting and how you can make the console output text. So let's say we want to write a little bit more. We want to say hello world, and we want to say console.write. Oops. This is my first application. We'll go ahead and run the debug to show you what happens with that. You'll notice that what it did was it put hello world and then this is my first application right next to each other. The reason for that is because we just told it to write this block of text to the console, and we never told it we want to actually change lines. So the way we do that is there's another method that's attached to console called console.writeLine. And what console.writeLine does is it will write this text that's in between these two parentheses as a single line on the screen, and it will actually insert a character return so that it goes to the next line on the screen. So if we hit start there, now you'll see, oops, we have hello world, this is my first application on those two lines. Something that you want to be careful not to do is do two write lines or multiple write lines in a row and then put this console.read in here. A lot of times what will happen, we'll double check this to make sure it does do it. No, it didn't do it with mine. But if you do multiple console.reads and you have multiple console.write lines in there, what can happen is when it inserts the second line and does a character return so that it's doing that there, it actually, the console.read picks up that character return and causes some problems in your application. So you want to make sure that you, at least for the first part with what we're doing, just make sure your last statement is a console.write. But this right here, this is all that I need you to do for assignment 1. Basically, I want you to prove that you have installed Visual Studio, that you can create a new project with your name in it, and that you can write a little code to the in that application. Very simplistic, very basic. So this is assignment 1. When you go to turn in assignment 1, what I would like you to do is find out where Visual Studio stored that project on your computer. By default, it's stored in the Libraries, Documents, Visual Studio 2012 Projects folder. And you can see I've got my assignment 1 right there. If I open that up, you'll see there's another folder underneath that. There's a couple of files in there too. This .sln file, that's what Visual Studio uses to define the program. And then if I open up this folder, you can see there's my actual code file. But what I'd like you to do is, in this projects folder, what I'd like you to do is just zip this folder up and attach that to Blackboard. So you can right click on it. If you have WinRAR or WinZip installed, you can just create an archive. You can use .zip or .rar. If you don't have either of those, you can just use the send-to compressed, and that will create a zip file for you. And just go into Blackboard and on the assignment, just attach that file to the assignment. So if I go through here, Visual Studio 2012, projects, attach that zip file. There you go. And just submit that, and that will be your assignment 1. The last thing that I wanted to go over before I end this video is throughout this class, you are going to have times when you're going to get stuck on a program and you're going to need help. And there's several different ways that we can do that. The first thing I'm going to point you to do is Google. I know that probably what like everybody says, but Google is a great source for finding out help on C# programming. If I wanted to know more about, the C# console, I could do C# console dot, let's say, write line, and that's going to give me a whole bunch of websites for that console.write line. Some of the best ones, skip over the Microsoft sites. I know it's Microsoft Visual Studio and Microsoft's the one who wrote C#, but their website can be very, very confusing, and I mean they have a lot of information, but it can be really hard to find exactly what you need. What I would recommend doing is look for the stackoverflow.com. In fact, if you just want to search Stack Overflow, that's another great place to get help on C# syntax and C# programming. Not just C# actually, any type of programming that you want to do. Stack Overflow is a great place to go for it. If we look at this one, you can see this person's having a problem with formatting strings within the console.write line, and there's an answer here. So look for these Stack Overflow posts. They can be a great source for getting information. If all else fails, you can always email me. That works. But better than emailing me is actually posting in this I Need Help forum. This I Need Help forum is here for you to use when you get stuck. I moderate this forum, so every time you post to it, it sends me an email to let me know, hey, somebody posted in that forum, so that I can see it. Also, your classmates can monitor this forum. And if you guys see somebody who's struggling with something and you know the answer to their question that they're having problems with, if they posted some code and you see, oh, they forgot a semicolon here, feel free to post and help your fellow classmates. That helps me, and it also helps them, and it helps you too to start looking at other people's code and seeing where they may have had a potential issue or where the pitfalls may be. So this is a great tool for you to get help and to give help throughout the class. Those are the major topics that I wanted to discuss in the lecture tonight. To do for this week, like I said, review the syllabus, get your introductory post posted, install Visual Studio 2012, write your first program, do your first assignment, and you should be good. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. Other than that, have a great week. Thank you.